The 8th century BC in the ancient Near East was defined by a specific geopolitical tension. To the north, the Assyrian Empire; to the south, the Kingdom of Judah; and caught in the middle were the allied forces of Damascus in Syria and Ephraim in Israel. The text of Isaiah 17 contains a chronological blueprint, charting a series of historical shifts that unfold across 33 years. At the center of this timeline is Assyria. The massive Lamassu statues guarding their palaces reflect the sheer scale of the threat they posed. They were the apex predators of the era and the primary engine driving the region toward collapse. This prophecy is structured around 4 precise dates: the initial invasions in 734 and 722 BC, a period of internal reform in 715 BC, and a sudden deliverance in 701 BC. We can map these geopolitical shifts by analyzing the biblical text verse by verse. Recognizing this chronological sequence aligns the poetic language of Isaiah with the recorded movements of empires in the ancient Levant. The timeline begins with the first wave of Assyrian aggression in 734 BC. Isaiah chapter 17 verse 1 states, "The burden of Damascus. Behold, Damascus is taken away from being a city, and it shall be a ruinous heap." This maps to the 734 BC Assyrian campaign, which devastated the Syrian capital and left its cities in ruins. Isaiah chapter 17 verse 2 continues, "The cities of Aroer are forsaken. They shall be for flocks, which shall lie down, and none shall make them afraid." Aroer was a region in Moab, and the text uses it as a benchmark for desolation. These ruins illustrate the scale of depopulation. The landscape was left so empty of human presence that livestock could roam and rest without fear. Verses 1 and 2 document the initial dismantling of the Syro-Ephraimite alliance's physical infrastructure. 12 years later, the final blow arrived with the 722 BC Assyrian invasion. Isaiah chapter 17 verse 3 reads, "The fortress also shall cease from Ephraim, and the kingdom from Damascus, and the remnant of Syria." Ephraim had relied on their fortress, or alliance, with Syria to resist Assyrian rule. When the kingdom of Damascus fell, that alliance collapsed, leaving Ephraim to share in Syria's ruin. Isaiah chapter 17 verses 4 and 5 describe the glory of Jacob waxing lean, and state that the enemy will gather the corn like a harvestman in the valley of Rephaim. The text uses an agricultural metaphor to describe the nation being stripped of its dignity and wealth. Just as a harvestman gathers corn from a field, the principal citizens of Ephraim were systematically collected and carried away into Assyria. Isaiah chapter 17 verse 6 shifts the imagery. "Yet gleaning grapes shall be left in it, as the shaking of an olive tree, 2 or 3 berries in the top of the uppermost bough." When ancient harvesters shook an olive tree, they left the worst fruit behind. The Assyrian reapers followed this pattern, leaving only a few people of the least consequence to remain in the land. These survivors formed the remnant of the northern tribes. They were a specific portion of the 10 tribes that were never lost to history, but remained in the land. The northern kingdom's reliance on political might resulted in absolute systemic collapse, reducing a whole nation to these scattered gleanings. While the northern kingdom fell, the focus shifts south to the kingdom of Judah in 715 BC, a period defined by internal reform. Isaiah chapter 17, verses 7 and 8 state, "At that day shall a man look to his Maker, and his eyes shall have respect to the Holy One of Israel, and he shall not look to the altars, the work of his hands." This shift toward a singular man looking to his Maker aligns with the reign of King Hezekiah, altars and images set up by his father, King Ahaz. This spiritual turning point proved to be long-lasting. Historical records in 2 Chronicles later note that even members of the remnant from Manasseh and Ephraim eventually brought offerings back to the temple in Jerusalem. Hezekiah's individual righteousness provided a functional alternative to the spiritual trajectory that had doomed the northern kingdom. By 701 BC, the Assyrian war machine was approaching Judah, testing the resilience of these reforms. Isaiah chapter 17, verses 9 and 10 note that strong cities would be forsaken because the people had forgotten the God of their salvation and instead planted strange slips. These strange slips represent imported idolatrous worship practices. Despite Hezekiah's efforts, many in Judah continued to cultivate these foreign spiritual influences. They had neglected the rock of their strength. Biblical cross-references in Deuteronomy and 1 Corinthians identify this rock as Jehovah, or Christ. Isaiah chapter 17, verse 11 warns that, while they might make these plants grow, the harvest would be a heap in the day of grief and of desperate sorrow. Persistent faith in idols bore its fruit in 701 BC. The day of grief arrived as Assyrian forces initiated the siege of Jerusalem, placing the survival of the kingdom in the balance. While Hezekiah led from the top, the broader population faced a final, catastrophic crucible to determine their ultimate allegiance. This brings us to the final date on the historical timeline, the 701 BC Assyrian assault on Jerusalem. Isaiah chapter 17, verses 12 and 13 describe a multitude roaring like the seas, but state that God shall rebuke them, and they shall flee far off. The multinational Assyrian army assaulted the shore of Judah like a rising tide, but they were supernaturally rebuked outside the city walls. In a single night, 185,000 soldiers were slain by the angel of God. Sennacherib and the survivors fled back to Nineveh, leaving their spoils behind. Isaiah chapter 17, verse 14 records the finality. And behold, at eveningtide, trouble, and before the morning he is not. The prophecy matches the historical outcome with literal exactness. An army that was ready to conquer Jerusalem in the evening was gone by morning. Human defensive alliances failed for decades to stop Assyria, yet the empire was dismantled outside Jerusalem in a single night. The text proves a consistent 33-year progression, tracking the Levant from the fall of Damascus to the miraculous preservation of Jerusalem. Two geopolitical outcomes emerge: the total devastation in 734 and 722 BC, fueled by idolatry, and the sudden deliverance of 701 BC. This narrative demonstrates that political maneuvering and defensive alliances are entirely futile against true existential threats. The ultimate survival of the remnant hinged on a total rejection of idols and a singular reliance upon the rock, a theological reality modeled by the reform of one king.